Hi, it's Gary. Welcome to today's video. Well, past few weeks we've been covering the various phases of my getting stuff done system. These are collect, think, plan, action and review. And we've covered them in a little bit of detail. Now, at the centre of all this, in the centre of my diagram, there's accountability. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to touch on that area of accountability. We all need to be accountable for our actions, but unfortunately, accountability, this is often either skipped or only just touched on. It's never really used to its full potential. We often, when we're trying to be held accountable, will only look at the obvious issues, the ones that are on the surface. We never bother to dig down that little bit deeper, and that's where the value of accountability can really come in. Without accountability, well, you've got nobody who's helping you to stay on track. You've got no one to turn to when things aren't going as well as you'd like to, or if you need that little bit of advice, that little bit of help. It also means you've got nobody else there to pat you on the back and say, "That was a brilliant job, you've done really well there." Accountability isn't just about being negative. Accountability is about praising people. It's about fetching the best out of yourself and of others. By having the right person to keep us accountable, well, it helps us to maintain our focus, keep us on track, and help us to deliver results. I've split this up into two sections. The first one, why be accountable? In this, we're going to take a brief look at some of the benefits that you can get by having somebody hold you accountable. The second section, I call it how to do it, and as the name suggests, it's some tips to help you to be either held or even to hold someone else accountable. So why should you be held accountable? Well, it increases your chance of success. A few years ago, there was a study done by the American Society of Training and Development, and they released the following statistics. If you have an idea, you've got 10% chance of doing it. If you decide when you'll do it, it jumps up to a 40% chance of doing it. If you plan how to do it, you're now at a 50% chance. Make a commitment to somebody else that you're going to do it, 65%. But if you set up an accountability appointment with the person you've committed to, your chance of success jumps to 95%. That means you're almost guaranteed to do what you've said you're going to do. By having somebody holding you accountable and meeting with them regularly, you increase your probability of success. Another benefit from using accountability, it helps you to identify issues. We all know, we've all been there, we're going along and we might hit a problem, we might hit something that we're struggling with. We try and solve it ourselves. We find that we can't, or we're getting stuck. By having a regular accountability review, it means that you're looking at your work with someone else. You're taking that separate point of view. You've got somebody there that you can ask questions of. So you've hit an issue. You can ask them, can they give you some advice? But not only that, as we're going along through our day, we tend to make assumptions. We read something, it's a bit ambiguous, so we make an assumption about what it means. Sometimes those assumptions aren't right. And again, as part of that accountability meeting that you have with an accountability partner, you tell them about your assumptions and you get them to challenge it, to actually discuss it and go deeper into what it means. And quite often, that may mean you have to slightly change the way you're doing something. If you hadn't had that accountability meeting, if you hadn't reviewed what you were doing, you'd have carried on going down the wrong path. The aim, you want to explore what you're doing. You want to identify issues or blockers, and then identify and put in place steps that you can take to address it, to allow you to move forward in a consistent and successful manner. Another nice thing with accountability, it helps with maintaining focus. I don't know about you, but I find it's really easy to get bogged down in details. You spend so much time focusing on a single issue that you lose the big picture. But also sometimes it's easy to go down a rabbit hole. It's easy to see something and just keep going and going, but it may not be moving you towards the solution that you want. I don't know about you, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I want everything to be done before I release it. I want it to be perfect. But this is actually a bad thing, and it causes me to focus on the wrong things. By concentrating on delivering perfection, it means I don't deliver something that's actually quite good and will do the job. There are times when you do need perfection. Say you're fixing a gas leak. You want that to be done properly, don't you? You don't want someone to come in and only do 80% of the job. But if you're writing a book, you might up fretting too much about an individual word or phrase. You never finish the book. That's where perfectionism can really hit you. The other thing with focus, and again, I do this all the time, it's so easy to go down a rabbit hole. I'm always doing it. You see that shiny thing and you chase after it. By having an accountability session, it means you've got somebody independent. They're there and they can pull you out of that rabbit hole. They can say to you, no, you don't need to concentrate on that. Come back and look at the main issue. But they can also say to you, this is good. Yes, it's not perfect. It's good. It can be released. Get it out there. They're there to help you to move away from always chasing perfect and to realise that quite often good, well, that's good enough. Problem solving. This is another area where accountability can help you. How often do you get stuck trying to find a solution to something? Not sure about you? I would say multiple times a day, to be honest. You try different ways to work it out. You maybe go and search for it on the internet. But whatever you try, you're going nowhere. You're not getting to the solution. The accountability session, that lets you talk to someone else. It lets you bounce your ideas off them. It lets you get different points of view. I often find that just the act of explaining the problem to somebody else, well, that's enough to trigger that aha moment. It's enough that I can work out the solution myself. I don't actually need input from the accountability partner. What I need them is to be there as a sounding board to actually slow down my thinking. So how do we do accountability? Well, it's not as difficult as it sounds. The first thing to think of is who's going to hold me accountable. Now, we all need someone to hold us accountable. And it could be a formal or it could be an informal arrangement. In a lot of cases, your accountability is very clear. If you're employed, generally you're accountable to a supervisor or a manager. If you're running a company, well, you're accountable to a board, to shareholders. But what about if you're a small business owner? You're working for yourself. It's not so clear then who you're accountable to. Some people will think, well, I'm accountable to myself. In most cases, it doesn't work. You're too close to the problem. The idea about accountability, you want that independent view. And if you're looking at yourself, I'm sorry, you just can't be objective. You may think to yourself, well, can I use my life partner? Can I use a family member? Can I use a close friend? Yes, you certainly can. But bear in mind, the majority of family members, the majority of your friends, yes, they want to see you succeed. Yes, they want to help you, but they don't want to upset you. So they're not really going to ask the hard questions. They're not going to tell you when what you're doing is not really the best way. They're not going to challenge you. They're just going to tell you what you want to hear. So using a family member or a friend is possible, but be aware there are downsides. Ideally, you want somebody who is independent. You want someone who's going to help you. They might need to give you some advice. They might need to give you some help on some technical challenges. You don't necessarily need an expert to hold you accountable, but it can help when you're working on a very technical job. What you want is somebody who is going to ask you the hard questions to keep you on track. The key to an accountability relationship is trust. You've got to be able to trust each other in order to have an open and frank discussion. So when looking for an accountability partner, get to know them. Make sure you can trust them. Once you've worked out who's going to hold you accountable, what I recommend is you create an accountability agreement. It doesn't have to be a big document. This is just about defining what you're going to get from the accountability partnership. I'm not going to go into details here. I'm just going to touch on them very quickly. I will do separate videos on these. But some key things to include in your accountability agreement is define the purpose. What are you looking for from the accountability agreement? What is the aim? What is it trying to achieve? By defining this at the start, it ensures the accountability agreement runs smoothly and to everyone's benefit. What are your expectations? What are your partner's expectations? In this step, we're defining what's expected from everybody. You might define things like how much time is required from each of you. When will the agreement start? When will it end? How often will you meet? How will you communicate? How will you meet together? All these little things, get them defined at the start, saves arguments later on. You'd also define the outcome. By outcome, we've got to be very careful. We've got to make sure that we're defining the business outcome. We're not trying to define the steps to be taken because that ends up leading down to micromanaging. What we're talking about is what's the end result, what is the business benefit we want from this. As part of the accountability meetings, yes, we may talk about individual steps, but we're not interested in the method of getting to the outcome. What we're trying to do is get to a business outcome. Just because somebody isn't working the same way as you does not mean it's not right. It might work for them. And that's why the focus on the outcome is so important. What commitments are you expecting? So it's actually very similar to expectations. The key difference, the expectations lay out the broad agreement that you have with each other. The commitments, they are explicit promises that you are making to each other that you will do. Things to include here, the person holding you accountable, well, they may guarantee you a set amount of exclusive time each week. You might define response times. So if you call someone, they may not answer, but they will guarantee to return the call the same day. If you send an email, they may promise to reply within 2 days. In here, you could also dedicate to each other's success. A good accountability agreement, it's not just about the success of one person, it's actually about the success of both. Another area to include is skills. This is where you're listing out any specialist skills. And we're not just looking here at your skills, but the skills of both people in the agreement. We don't want to be having an accountability agreement with someone who doesn't have the skills to help us. So say you're going to produce a 2-year financial forecast for your business, but the person who's going to hold you accountable, well, they've got no idea about finance. They're a computer programmer. They like to do stuff on the computer. They don't have the skills to help you to succeed. Once we've defined the accountability agreement, it's important that we document it, that we write it down, and then that we accept it. If you don't have it written down, if you don't have an agreement from both people, it's hard to get success. Another strategy that I find that helps with accountability agreements, and this may or may not be documented, is to look at rewards. In the accountability agreement, we will have recorded how we're going to measure progress, how we're going to measure success. We'd have talked about the process we're going to be using, not the steps, but the actual general process of the accountability. We'd have defined a number of milestones. I love milestones because that's how you know you're moving forward. What's a nice thing to include, not necessarily in the formal agreement, is the idea of a reward. So this is when you hit a specific milestone, you get a reward. You get something which rewards you for doing that work. Remember, it's the business outcome that we're talking about. So those milestones, they should be focused on the business outcome. It could be you're writing a report. The business outcome will be to have that report published. But a milestone could be to have a draft. And you may have, as I say informally, a reward listed of when I hit the draft, I'll get that person a bar of chocolate. It doesn't have to be something really complex. Sometimes the small rewards, they're the ones that get the most bang. Notice here, I keep using the word reward. It's all about positive. It's all about building motivation. If we reward someone too often, it can lead to demotivation because at the end of the day, if you're getting rewarded for every little thing, the reward has no meaning. So that's why we have to tie it to specific milestones. What types of rewards could we use? It could be a formal acknowledgement in a team email or a team meeting. It could be a gift. It could be a small amount of cash, or as I say, even a bar of chocolate. It could be that you give someone a day off. Focus on positive. Focus on building the individual's self-worth, their self-belief, so that they can carry on and deliver the successful business result. Do not use negative consequences. And I've seen a lot of places, and I've worked in a lot of places where they think that you should never be positive, you should only be putting people down. If you're using negative consequences, what you're going to do is you're going to push people so that they achieve the minimum level that they need to do. It doesn't incentivize them to go above that minimum level, because what they're going to think is, well, they're going to complain about me anyway, so I'll just do the bare minimum that I need to do. In the long term, negative consequences, well, they're ineffective. You'll find that people, they'll regularly miss targets, they'll be demoralized, and they're likely to leave the organisation. The use of negative consequences needs to be carefully monitored to ensure it does not turn into bullying and a way of manoeuvring people out of an organisation. So to summarise, we all need somebody to hold us accountable. Now, the amount of people holding us accountable, that's actually variable. You may find you've got multiple people doing that because you've got multiple projects and they all require different skills. Accountability, it brings control to your work and it allows you to drive forward to deliver business outcomes, projects and commitments that you're making. It's important that you have a trusting relationship with your accountability partner. Without this, you're not going to fully accept their input and their guidance. It means you're not going to hit that business outcome. Without accountability, you're setting yourself up for failure. Issues that you could identify early on by talking to someone else, well, they're never identified, they're never addressed. That means it costs more to fix them. Higher costs, they eat into your profit, and also they can affect client satisfaction. It's important to make sure you document your accountability agreements. It doesn't have to be a big document, it could just be an email, but get it written down. Agree what you're going to do, document it, make sure both of you sign off, and then get going. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Have you got people holding you accountable? Who are they? Are they helping you to move forward, or are they there just for someone to talk to allow you to bounce those ideas off? Both are valid ways of doing it. Please hit the thumbs up button every time you like, every time you comment. Well, that helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you can get new videos as I release them. I'll talk to you again soon.